Alright, Common Core Algebra 1 then. We are looking at our second lesson about factoring quadratics. And the biggest thing here is now we're going to say that A is not 1. So that's going to change our problem a little bit. It's going to make it a little more difficult. We're going to have a couple extra steps, but hopefully we'll do pretty well with it. So if you look at these two, like we've talked about here, our A is 1. And so we factored this by just taking C equals 8 and then finding the factors of C that add up to B, which is -6. And that's all because A equals 1. But on this one, A is now 2, B is -7, and C is 3. So we're no longer going to be able to do just factors of C that add up to -7. What we're going to have to do, the difference is that we're going to find A times C, which in this case will be 6, and the factors of 6 that add up to -7. So big difference is that our A value is different, and because our A value is not 1, we're going to have to do a slightly different method. So the steps for this, we're going to start by multiplying A times C. So it may even help you to find A, B, and C. There we go. And we're going to multiply by A times C. We're going to choose the factors of that from step 1 that add up to B. Okay, remember, factors are two numbers that multiply. We're going to rewrite the quadratic with these factors. So one thing here you may want to add to this is that we are essentially going to unsimplify. Okay, we're going to unsimplify that so that we can then, in the end, simplify again. Okay, after we've unsimplified, we should now have, when we unsimplify, maybe want to add here that we'll have 4 terms instead of the 3 terms of our trinomials. And we'll find the greatest common factor of the first 2 terms and the greatest common factor of the last 2 terms. So this step is called factor by grouping. Okay, factor by grouping. And then finally you're going to rewrite it as a factored polynomial. Now remember, when we rewrite these as a factored polynomial, it's going to be 2 binomials. So we will have something like, and I can just make this up, 2x plus 1 and x minus 3. So we have 2 binomials, meaning 2 terms here added together, 2 terms here subtracted together. They could both be plus, they could both be minus. Let's look at an example then. If we take that one we already talked about. So we know that A is 2, B is -7, and C is 3. So if we take A times C, so let's make that an A times C, 2 times 3 is going to give us 6. Okay, and we're looking for factors of 6 that add up to -7. So if I take AC equals 6 and I do our little factor tree that we've been doing in class, I could say 2 and 3, but that adds up to 5, so that's no good. I could do the opposite. It's -2, -3, but that also adds up to -5, so that's no good. You'll notice this is a negative, so that does tell me they both need to be negative. If we could try -1 and -6. So what I want to do is take my quadratic, so I'm going to rewrite it here, 2x squared minus 7x plus 3, and I'm going to rewrite it. And another way we said was to unsimplify it. So I need to take these 2 terms that we chose, and I'm going to unsimplify that middle term. In other words, I could rewrite -7x as a -1x minus 6x. This still gives me 7x, or -7x. I'm going to bring down my first term, that's going to be unchanged, and I'm going to bring down my last term, that's unchanged. Another thing I would actually do here is write this as plus a -6. And then we said we're going to factor by grouping. So I'm going to group my first 2 terms into parentheses. So 2x squared minus 1x, that's one parentheses, plus, and that plus is important, in the other parentheses, my other group, -6x plus 3. Okay, so if we look at our first 2 terms, -2x squared minus 1x, our greatest common factor is x, and if I look at my second 2 terms, my greatest common factor, and because this first one is negative, is going to be a -3. Okay, if I factor an x out of my first 2 terms, so I'll factor an x out here, I would get 2x minus 1. Think about how we did greatest common factors the other day. If I factor out a -3 here, -6 divided by -3 gives me 2, and I still have the x, and 3 divided by -3 is a -1. Hey, getting to this step really tells us if we have done things correctly or not. And we really need to look at what we have inside our parentheses. If those two are the same, then we know we did our factoring correct. So I'm going to write my first two terms, my first parentheses, 2x minus 1. That always becomes 1. The other option then is we're going to look at our things that are outside, the plus -3 and the x, and that is going to become my other one. So x plus a -3. And remember, this is the opposite of distribution. So if we went back and we distributed this, we would end up with our original problem. So this right here is our answer in factored form. Right, and that is it for how we factor trinomials when a is not equal to 1. Obviously, this is a little more challenging than when a is equal to 1, and we'll spend pretty much all week in class on this. Okay, see you next time.